The sky was dark, full of smoke and fire. Metal ships floated above like black clouds. The ground was shaking with every distant explosion. Human soldiers stood in long lines, their faces covered in dirt and sweat. Their uniforms were old, their helmets scratched, but their eyes were sharp. Next to them stood the alien army. They were tall and thin, with skin that shined like glass. Their armor glowed with blue lights, and their plasma guns hummed with power. The alien commanders walked proudly between their soldiers, their heads held high. One of them, Commander Rectal, looked at the human rifles and laughed. "What is this?" Rectal said with a loud voice. "A weapon from your history museum?" He pointed at Captain Mason's rifle. It was long and old, with scratches on the wood and a metal barrel that had lost its shine. "This is war, not history class, human," Rectal added, and the alien soldiers laughed with him. Mason did not answer. He slowly pushed a bullet into the rifle and pulled the bolt with a solid click. His face showed no fear, no shame. His men stood behind him, holding the same kind of old rifles. Not one of them said a word. Rectal shook his head. "You humans are brave, but foolish. When the enemy arrives, your toys will break." Mason's eyes moved to the horizon. A soft sound began to fill the air, a strange, low hum. The radar screens in the command tent started flashing red. A voice shouted from the radio, "They're coming!" A big wave. The alien soldiers began to cheer. They thought their high-tech weapons would crush the enemy. Their drones rose into the air like a silver swarm. Tanks with glowing cannons rolled forward. The aliens were ready to show their power. Mason just adjusted the strap of his helmet. He had fought these enemies before. He knew their tricks. He knew the silence before their attack was always the most dangerous part. Suddenly the ground shook hard. A huge shadow moved in the fog. The enemy was here. They were insectoid creatures, tall and fast, with black shells and red eyes. They moved like a river of death. Their weapons shot out invisible EMP waves, and everything began to change. The alien drones in the sky fell like stones. Their tanks went silent. Plasma guns made a small flash, then died. All the bright lights in the alien camp turned black. Soldiers began shouting in panic. "No power!" one alien cried. "My weapon is dead!" shouted another. "This cannot be!" Rectal screamed. Mason lifted his rifle and aimed down the sight. The weapon didn't care about EMP. It didn't need power. It only needed one finger to pull the trigger. Bang! The first bullet tore through the air and hit an enemy in the head. It fell instantly, bang, bang. The other humans fired too. Their rifles cracked like thunder. Each shot was clean. No overheating. No battery problems. No panic. The alien soldiers stared with wide eyes. Their shiny technology was useless. But these old human rifles kept firing again and again. Rectal dropped his broken plasma gun. He grabbed the arm of a human soldier. "How is this working?" he shouted. The soldier just smiled and kept firing. The enemy kept coming. Their claws ripped into the ground. Their screams filled the air. But the human line held firm. Every time an enemy stepped closer, another bullet brought it down. The humans fired with rhythm, like they had done this 1,000 times before. Mason walked along the line. "Aim steady," he said calmly. "Breathe, fire!" The alien commander looked around. His soldiers were scared. Their advanced weapons were now nothing more than metal sticks. For the first time, Rectal felt fear. The enemy wave grew louder. The fog was thick with movement. One alien soldier tried to run, but Mason's voice cut through the noise. "Stand your ground." Rectal turned his head slowly and looked at Mason. This human captain did not shout. He did not show fear. He only raised his rifle again and fired. Another creature dropped. Another followed. The rhythm was strong. The humans were like a wall. The alien commander's heart pounded. He remembered how he had laughed earlier. He remembered calling the rifles toys, but these toys were saving everyone now. The radio buzzed with static. Her voice screamed through the noise. More enemies coming. Bigger ones. Rectal's blood turned cold. His army had no power. His plasma guns were silent. The humans had only their old rifles and their courage. "We are finished," one alien whispered, but Mason's voice was steady. "We are not finished," he said. "We just started." The alien commander stared at the human captain. In that moment he saw something he had never seen before. A calm fire in human eyes. a kind of strength that did not need glowing armor or plasma guns. In the fog, the sound of heavy enemy steps grew louder. Something big was coming. Bigger than anything they had seen before. Mason lifted his rifle slowly and aimed it at the fog. "Get ready," he said. "This is where the real fight begins." The alien commander gripped the useless plasma gun. He felt helpless. But then, deep inside, something changed. He began to believe in the humans. The old rifles were ready. The line was ready. The enemy roared. The humans answered with the sound of steel and fire. Bang! The night sky shook as the second enemy wave appeared. The fog moved like a living thing. Heavy footsteps echoed through the dark valley. A new sound filled the air, a deep growl that made even the bravest soldiers feel cold inside. Commander Rectal gripped his useless plasma gun and stared into the mist. The blue lights on his armor were still dead. His drones lay broken in the dirt. Their shining technology was now nothing more than silent scrap. Beside him, Captain Mason stood calm, his old rifle pressed against his shoulder. The human soldiers checked their magazines, their hands moving fast but steady. "They're coming again," Mason said quietly. Rectal turned his head. "We can't stop them. We have no power, no shields, no drones." Mason did not look at him. "We still have this," he said, lifting his rifle. The alien commander could not understand how a small piece of metal and wood could mean anything against the enemy army. But then a huge shape stepped out of the fog. The creature was twice the size of a normal enemy. It had spikes along its back and glowing red eyes. It opened its mouth and screamed, a scream that cut through the air like a blade. The alien soldiers stepped back in fear. But Mason took one step forward. He aimed, held his breath, and pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet hit the monster's shoulder. Black blood sprayed into the air. The creature roared and charged. More enemies followed behind it. A wave of black and red filled the field. "Hold the line!" Mason shouted. The human rifles began to sing their hard, sharp song. Bang, 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 each shot was clean. Enemies dropped one after another. The aliens could only watch as the humans fired with calm faces. There was no panic, no confusion. It was like they had trained for this moment all their lives. Rectal lifted his plasma gun and hit the trigger again and again, but nothing happened. Only silence. He threw the gun to the ground. "This is madness," he whispered. An alien soldier beside him shouted, "We can't win. Our weapons are dead." Rectal wanted to scream back, but then he saw something. One of Mason's soldiers was on the ground, reloading calmly while the enemy rushed closer. Another human reached down, grabbed the man's arm, pulled him up, and fired a shot over his shoulder. Their movement was perfect, smooth, no fear. Only trust. The commander felt something strange, respect. Then the enemy wave reached the line. Claws hit sandbags. Teeth snapped. The air filled with the sound of death. But the human soldiers did not break. They moved in tight formation, firing, reloading, firing again. Rectal could not stand still anymore. He picked up a fallen human rifle. It was heavier than his plasma gun, rough to touch and smelled of oil and metal. But when he held it, it felt alive. It felt real. He aimed the rifle, just like Mason had done. He pulled the trigger. Bang! The recoil kicked his shoulder. But the bullet hit a creature straight in the head. It fell to the ground. For the first time in his life, Commander Rectal smiled in the middle of a battle. "I got one," he shouted. Mason glanced at him for a second. "Good," he said simply, then fired again. The battle was brutal. The aliens were no longer commanders of shiny machines. They were just soldiers now, standing shoulder to shoulder with humans covered in mud and blood. The enemy was fast, strong, and endless, but the rifles kept firing. Their sound became the heartbeat of the battlefield. One of the giant creatures slammed its claw into the line. 2 human soldiers fell back. Rectal aimed and fired again, missed, fired again, hit. The creature screamed and dropped. A human soldier gave Rectal a quick nod. "Not bad for a rookie," the soldier said. Rectal let out a short laugh. He had never felt like this before, not as a commander giving orders from the back, but as a fighter in the dirt. The fog grew darker. More red eyes appeared. Another wave was coming. Mason ordered his soldiers to fall back 10 meters to a second line of defense. The humans had built it earlier with sandbags and spikes. Rectal realized they had planned for this. The alien army had trusted their technology. The humans had trusted their preparation. As the line fell back, the enemy stepped on hidden traps. Metal spikes shot up. Explosions tore through the ground. The enemy ranks broke for a moment, confused. Mason raised his rifle again. "Fire!" he shouted. Bang! 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 The humans and aliens, now together, fired in one line. Their old rifles were the only weapons still working. The enemy fell in dozens. The fog turned quiet again. The second wave was broken. Rectal dropped the empty magazine and reloaded like a human soldier. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. From adrenaline. He looked at Mason. "I was wrong," Rectal said slowly. "Your weapons. They are not weak." Mason didn't smile. "They're just honest," he said. "They don't lie to you." For a moment there was silence. Only the sound of burning machines and buzzing flies filled the air. The alien soldiers stared at the human rifles in their hands. They had mocked these weapons. But now these same rifles had saved their lives. Then the radar beeped again. Louder this time. A cold wind moved through the valley. "This was just the start," Mason said. "The real army is coming." Rectal stared at the horizon. A massive dark shape moved behind the fog. He could feel the ground shake. "How many?" he asked. "Enough," Mason said. "Enough to finish us." "Unless we finish them first." The alien commander tightened his grip on the old rifle. It was strange. But for the first time he felt ready. The fog was heavy and cold. Every soldier on the line could feel the ground shaking. It was like a giant heartbeat beneath their feet. From far away, a deep roar rolled across the battlefield. It was not one creature this time. It was thousands. Commander Rectal stood next to Captain Mason, gripping the old human rifle in his hands. His plasma gun, once a symbol of power, lay broken in the mud behind him. All the alien machines were still silent. The EMP attack had killed their technology completely. There was no way to fix it now. The alien soldiers were nervous. They whispered to each other in their strange language. Some looked at the sky as if they were waiting for someone to save them. But no help was coming. Mason walked slowly down the line. His boots pressed into the wet ground. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He spoke in a clear voice that cut through the noise of fear. "Listen up," Mason said. "They think we're weak. They think old rifles can't stop them. We'll show them they're wrong." A young alien soldier raised his hand nervously. "But our defenses are broken," the alien said. "We have no shields, no air support, no drones." Mason looked at him and nodded. "You're right. We don't, but we still have something they don't." "What?" the alien asked. Mason lifted his rifle. "A plan." He pointed to the second line of defense. It was made of sandbags, steel plates, and barbed wire. There were no energy shields, no glowing towers, nothing fancy. Just human-built traps and grit. "This line is simple," Mason said, "and simple doesn't break. We fight smart. We fight quiet. We let them come to us." Rectal watched as the human soldiers moved fast, setting traps in the mud. They placed metal spikes hidden under dark water. They tied grenades to tripwires. They checked every rifle twice. Their movements were fast but organized. Not a single man shouted. It was like a dance they had done many times before. The alien soldiers slowly started to help. At first they were clumsy. They were used to touching glowing buttons, not dirty wires. But Mason's men showed them how. Rectal found himself digging into the dirt, setting a trap next to a human soldier. "Strange," Rectal said. "A few hours ago I was mocking you." The human soldier gave a small smile. "And now?" Rectal tightened the wire with his strong alien hands. "Now, I'm learning from you." Above them, thunder cracked. It wasn't the weather. It was the enemy army moving closer. The alien soldiers stopped whispering. They began to focus. They copied the humans. Soon the defense line was ready. Mason stood at the front. "Positions!" he shouted. Rectal felt the cold metal of the rifle against his skin. It was heavy, yes, but solid, reliable. For the first time he felt like a real soldier, not just a commander hiding behind glowing tech. The fog split open. The enemy appeared. Not a small group this time. It was a black ocean of monsters. Their eyes burned red. Their claws scraped the ground. Some of them were huge, like walking tanks with bone armor. The alien soldiers tensed. One of them whispered, "There are too many." Mason's voice was calm. "Good, more targets." The monsters screamed and rushed forward. The earth shook. The first line of hidden traps exploded with a roar. Spikes flew into the air. Mines ripped through the front ranks. Dozens of creatures fell before they even reached the humans. Then the rest of the enemy crashed into the wire. "Hold the line!" Mason shouted. "Fire!" Bang, 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 the rifles roared. A wall of bullets cut through the fog. Human soldiers and alien soldiers fired side by side. Rectal pressed the trigger again and again. Each shot hit. His hands were steady now. The monsters howled, climbing over their fallen. But more traps exploded. The fog turned red with their blood. The simple old defenses worked better than any plasma shield. Rectal fired at a big creature charging toward Mason. The bullet hit its chest. It stumbled, and Mason finished it with a clean shot to the head. For a moment their eyes met. Rectal gave a short nod. Mason nodded back. No words were needed. The battle was brutal. The monsters kept coming, but the line held. The rifles never overheated. The magazines were easy to change. Every weapon worked exactly as it was supposed to. Simple, honest, deadly. One of the creatures managed to break through. It was a huge beast with 3 glowing eyes and armor made of bone. It slammed into the sandbag, sending soldiers flying. Everyone froze for a second. Mason ran toward it without hesitation. "Cover me!" he shouted. Rectal and 3 human soldiers opened fire. Bullets hit the creature's legs and sides, slowing it down. Mason jumped onto a broken wall, aimed and fired one clean shot. Bang, the bullet hit the creature between the eyes. It screamed, fell backward, and crashed into the mud. The line cheered for the first time that night. Rectal felt his heart racing. Not with fear this time, but with fire. He had mocked this human captain. He had mocked their simple rifles. But now, standing beside him, firing the same weapon, he felt respect. Deep, real respect. "Your plan is working," Rectal said, breathing hard. "That's not the plan," Mason said, reloading smoothly. "It's the people." The enemy pulled back slightly, roaring in frustration. The battlefield was a graveyard of their own kind. The humans had turned weakness into strength. Rectal realized something powerful. Sometimes simple wins because it can't be broken. But before anyone could celebrate, the ground shook again. Harder than before. The fog rolled back like a curtain. And then they saw it. A massive enemy beast, taller than the buildings around them. Its claws dripped with dark blood. Its eyes glowed like fire. Rectal felt the air leave his chest. "What is that?" Mason stared at the monster with steady eyes. "That," he said, "is our next problem." The ground shook like thunder. Dust rose into the cold night air. The giant creature stood tall in the fog, blocking out the stars. Its body was covered with thick black armor plates. Long claws dragged against the ground, making a metal-on-stone sound that cut through the noise. 3 red eyes burned like fire. Every soldier, human and alien, felt fear crawl down their spine. Commander Rectal had faced many enemies before, but never anything like this. His hands tightened on the old human rifle. For a moment, his glowing armor and plasma weapons felt like toys from another life. All he had now was a weapon made of wood and steel. And the man standing next to him. Captain Mason stared at the monster without blinking. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were calm. He slowly pulled back the bolt on his rifle, loaded a single bullet and clicked it into place. The giant beast let out a roar that shook the air. Alien soldiers stepped back. Some covered their ears. The humans didn't move. They had fought fear before. They knew that standing still was sometimes louder than screaming. "It's coming," Rectal whispered. The monster began to run. The ground trembled with every step. Its claws tore through the traps like they were paper. Mines exploded under its feet, but it didn't stop. Bullets bounced off its thick armor like rain hitting stone. "It's not going down," one alien shouted. "Keep firing," Mason commanded. Bang, bang, bang. The rifles screamed, but the beast just roared louder. It swung one massive arm forward, smashing through the sandbags. 2 alien soldiers were thrown into the air like leaves in a storm. Another soldier fell under its heavy foot and disappeared in the mud. Rectal fired as fast as he could. His bullets hit the creature's side, but nothing happened. The monster's armor was too thick. Panic started to spread. "We can't stop it," someone yelled, but Mason didn't move from his spot. He stepped forward, closer to the monster, ignoring the shouts behind him. "Mason!" Rectal yelled. "What are you doing?" Mason raised his rifle and looked through the iron sight. The monster's eyes glowed bright red. It was charging straight at him, but Mason wasn't looking at the claws or the armor. He was looking at something small, a thin gap between two armor plates on its neck. A weak point. He had seen creatures like this before. He knew their secret. The alien commander wanted to pull him back, but something in Mason's face stopped him. It wasn't madness. It was focus. Cold, sharp focus. "Cover me," Mason said. Without another word, Rectal lifted his rifle and fired at the monster's shoulders to keep its attention. Human soldiers followed. A wall of bullets hit the creature. It roared, raising its head for just a second. That was the moment Mason had been waiting for. He held his breath. The world around him grew silent. No explosions, no shouts, only the sight of that thin gap. "Aim true," Mason whispered. He squeezed the trigger. Bang! The bullet flew through the air, cutting the fog like a blade. It hit the weak point exactly. A flash of black blood burst out. The giant creature screamed, louder than anything they had ever heard. It stumbled, its legs shaking like broken towers. Then it crashed to the ground with a sound like thunder, shaking the earth beneath them. For a second, no one moved. No one even breathed. Then the alien soldiers began to cheer. The humans raised their rifles high. The monster that looked unstoppable lay dead in the mud because of one old bullet and a man who refused to step back. Rectal walked toward Mason, his face covered in mud and blood, his chest rising and falling fast. "That was impossible," Rectal said. Mason lowered his rifle slowly. "No," he said. "It was just hard." The alien commander looked down at the hole in the creature's neck. It wasn't the power of the weapon that had won. It was the aim, the timing, and the will. He had mocked these rifles before. Now he had seen what they could do in the hands of someone who believed in them. But the celebration didn't last long. The radar screens began to beep again, louder than before. The sky flashed red as enemy signals filled the air. A soldier ran toward Mason, shouting, "Sir! A final wave!" All of them. Rectal turned and saw it too, a wall of red lights in the distance. Hundreds of creatures, maybe thousands. The monster Mason killed was only the first boss. The true army was still coming. The alien soldiers looked scared again. Their technology was still dead. Their glowing armor was just cold metal, but this time something was different. Their eyes turned not to their broken plasma guns, but to the old human rifles in their hands. Mason stood tall. "They're bringing everything they've got." Rectal lifted his rifle. His hands no longer shook. "Then we'll give them everything we've got too," Rectal said. Mason gave him a small, proud smile. The human and alien soldiers began to take positions. They rebuilt parts of the defense line, dragged ammo boxes into place, and checked every rifle. The fog shook with the coming army, but the soldiers no longer felt helpless. This time they were ready. Mason looked at his men, then at the alien troops beside them. "Remember," he said loudly, "it's not the weapon, it's the one holding it." Rectal echoed his words in the alien language so everyone could hear. The soldiers shouted back. It was no longer two armies. It was one. In the distance, the final wave of enemies screamed like a storm. The humans and aliens raised their rifles, and Mason whispered, just loud enough for Rectal to hear, "Let's end this." The fog was shaking. The ground was rumbling like the sky itself was about to break open. On the horizon, thousands of red eyes burned in the darkness. The final wave of enemies was coming. Their roars rose together like a storm. It was a sound that made weaker hearts break. But this time the soldiers on the line did not break. Humans and aliens stood side by side, rifles in hand. No drones, no plasma guns, no shiny armor. Only dirt, sweat, and steel. The old human rifles were the only things still working, the only light in the dark. Captain Mason stood at the center, his uniform covered in mud and black blood. Commander Rectal stood beside him, holding the same kind of old rifle he had mocked only hours ago. But now that rifle felt like part of his own body. The enemy army moved closer, fast. Their claws tore the ground. Their screeches cut through the air like blades. The soldiers on the line gripped their weapons tighter. Their hearts were pounding, but their feet didn't move. Not an inch. "Listen to me," Mason said, his voice calm but strong. "This is it. No one else is coming. No machines, no magic. Just us." He looked at the human soldiers. Then he looked at the alien soldiers. "But that's enough," he said. Rektal stepped forward. His voice was deep and clear. "We fight together," he shouted. "And we don't run." The alien soldiers raised their rifles and roared in agreement. For the first time in history, two armies, human and alien, shouted the same battle cry. The fog burst open as the enemy wave hit the traps. Explosions lit the night like lightning. The first creatures fell into hidden spikes. Others were torn apart by buried grenades. But there were too many. They kept coming. "Fire!" Mason shouted. Bang, bang, bang. The rifles roared like thunder. The line became a wall of fire. Bullets flew through the fog, cutting down creatures left and right. Alien soldiers fired with human precision now. Their hands no longer shook. They were soldiers, not engineers. Warriors, not watchers. Rektal fired again and again. His aim was sharp. A large creature tried to climb the barricade, and he shot it between the eyes. It fell backward, crushing the enemies behind it. The enemy wave slammed into the defense line. Claws hit sandbags. Teeth snapped. But the soldiers didn't give up. Humans and aliens pushed back together. Their rifles kept firing. No power, no overheating, no failure. An alien soldier fell, but a human pulled him back up. A human was cornered, and an alien covered him with fire. The line bent but did not break. Then the second layer of enemies appeared. These were bigger, stronger, faster. They ran through the fog like black shadows. The line shook. "Fall to the second defense." Mason ordered. They stepped back in perfect order, leaving the enemy stuck in traps they had built earlier. Explosions tore through the monsters again. The air filled with fire and smoke. Mason reloaded fast and shouted, "Hold steady!" Rektal fired beside him. His arms ached, his ears rang, but he didn't care. He had never felt so alive in a battle. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for something bigger, for trust. The enemy pushed harder. Their leader, a massive horned creature, charged at the wall like a tank. Its scream was so loud it made the ground crack. Mason ran forward, aimed, and fired 3 quick shots. The bullets hit its neck, shoulder, and chest. The creature stumbled. Rektal aimed at the same weak point Mason had shown him earlier. His finger pressed the trigger slowly, carefully. Bang! The bullet went straight through the creature's throat. It fell like a mountain crashing down. The alien soldiers cheered. The humans shouted with them. The enemy, seeing their leader dead, began to slow down. But Mason didn't cheer. He raised his rifle again. "Don't stop! End it!" The soldiers answered with fire. Bang, bang, bang. The last wave crashed and burned under the rain of bullets and explosions. One by one, the creatures fell. Some into traps, some from clean shots. The battlefield became silent except for the sound of smoke rising and the last echo of gunfire. Finally, there was no one left to fight. The fog cleared slowly. The ground was covered with black bodies. The defense line still stood. The soldiers, tired, bleeding, dirty, yet were still alive. Rektal fell to one knee, breathing hard. He looked at the rifle in his hands. The old scratched heavy rifle, the same weapon he had laughed at not long ago. Now it had saved not just humans, but everyone. "I mocked this," Rektal said quietly. Mason stood beside him. "You weren't wrong," he said softly. "It is old." Rektal looked up at him. Mason smiled faintly. "But old doesn't mean weak." Around them, alien soldiers were still holding the human rifles. They were whispering in awe, touching the wood and steel like it was something sacred. Rektal slowly raised the rifle to his chest and gave Mason a firm nod. "Today," Rektal said, "your history saved our future." Mason didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He looked out over the battlefield. The enemy was gone. The war had turned. Not because of bright technology or shining guns, but because of something simple, something reliable, something human. The camera would have zoomed in, if this were a movie, on the old rifle in Mason's hand. Smoke curled from the barrel like a soft whisper. "Sometimes," Mason said quietly, "the future is saved by the past." And for the first time, alien and human soldiers stood together, not as two armies, but as one.